You blew my mind. You are a real man.
It started on our wedding night. The air in the room was thick and warm, smelling of new linen and a nervous joy. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I remember the weight of her, a soft, fleeting pressure, and then the intense, shuddering release. I lay there, catching my breath, the pleasant, heavy lethargy of a man finally at rest. But Precious didn't share that rest. Before the heat could even cool from our skin, she moved. It wasn't a quiet slip to the in-soot bathroom, the usual retreat for post-coital tidiness. No, she rose in one smooth, almost spectral motion and walked toward the far corner of the room, where the full-length mirror stood. This wasn't a standard, wall-mounted mirror. It was one I had picked out myself, a huge, ornate piece of polished glass that stood like a silent sentinel in the dim light. I watched, my eyelids suddenly feeling too heavy to lift all the way as she stopped before her reflection. She wasn't just glancing. She was conducting an inspection. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as if she was checking for damage or charting a territory. Her long, black hair, freed from its wedding style, was lifted and shaken, her fingers running through it as she stared. And she touched her face, a lingering brush across her cheek, a press against her jaw. Finally, her eyes, usually so placid, were focused intensely on her reflection, her gaze fixed as she turned slightly, checking her shoulders and the small of her back. It was a prolonged inspection, like she's verifying her own existence or searching for a flaw. At first, I thought it was a normal thing. I never thought there was anything dark or strange about this act. Any woman can do this. But then, she repeated it. She stayed there for what felt like an hour, staring at the woman looking back at her. Her face, in the faint ambient light from the street lamp outside, was impossible to read. It was a mask of intense concentration. Then, just as smoothly as she had risen, she returned. She pressed her beautiful, soft body against mine, a perfect, comforting fit, and acted like nothing happened. Like nothing happened. The contrast sent a tiny, electric shiver of alarm through me. Why after? I thought, my mind running a panicked race. Why not before, when she was dressing up? Is she checking for a mark? Is she worried about a change? Did I hurt her? The questions were a silent, terrifying whisper in my mind. Is she confirming her appearance? Or is she verifying who is looking back? The final thought, so bizarre and sharp, made my heart skip a beat. It almost felt like she was communicating with someone about what just happened. My world was supposed to be a quiet place, a sanctuary built of peace and the scent of pomade from my mega barbing saloon. At 33, Ekene believed I had found the perfect architect for that sanctuary in Precious. My pastor had introduced her, a beautiful, soft-spoken woman of 28, with the kind of calmness that felt like a cool, midnight breeze after a scorching day. She looked like peace, I told myself, and that was all the endorsement I needed. I had my salon, she had her serene presence, and together, we would have a life as smooth as a fresh haircut. Our first 3 months were a dream woven from silence and soft smiles. Precious was a marvel of grace. She moved with a slow, deliberate elegance, her posture always straight, her eyes dark, deep pools that rarely showed a flicker of agitation. She always wore clothes that were modest but impeccably tailored, reflecting a taste for the private, understated luxury of a woman who values control. Her hair, usually a simple, neat braid or a low bun, framed a face that was almost unervingly beautiful. I had married her on a simple introduction, a chillingly direct, "God said this is your wife." Marry her, and her lack of visible family, her too many personal things and mysterious past, had seemed like charming, manageable quirks back then. I was foolishly confident. I remember my father, a tall, imposing man who didn't mince words, asking me twice to arrange a meeting with her people. I, with a careless flick of the wrist, cunningly changed the topic. What did it matter? I thought. Auntie Rose had signed a register, and Precious was mine. Now, however, a new, cold pattern had replaced the manageable quirks. It was a ritual, a silent, unsettling performance that began the moment our bodies would finally, intimately connect. She did it again and again every night, like it was a movement she has rehearsed all her life. A cold knot began to tighten in my stomach. The warmth of our intimacy had vanished, replaced by a sudden, creeping chill. My fear, unfortunately, was granted the cold comfort of routine. Every time, without fail, the mirror ritual followed our lovemaking. It became a clock, marking the end of our physical connection and the beginning of my internal crisis. Our intimacy began to feel like a countdown, a direct path leading only to that unsettling inspection. The anticipation of the mirror's gaze poisoned the moments leading up to it, replacing pleasure with a growing dread. One evening, unable to bear the silence and the suffocating curiosity, I tried to approach it gently. We were lying in the aftermath, and she hadn't moved yet. I reached out and stroked the smooth skin of her arm. "Precious," I began, my voice a little rough. "Do you always check the mirror after?" She turned to me, a sudden, bright smile on her face, a smile that felt too perfect, too ready. Her dark eyes, those calm pools, seemed to hold a challenge. "Why not?" she replied, her voice light and musical. "Am I not beautiful enough for you to look at me?" It was an evasive answer, a shield of false confidence that pushed my question back onto me, making me feel small and suspicious. I didn't press it. The weight of her beauty and the fear of creating the conflict I despised kept the rest of my questions trapped in my throat. The true terror arrived with the darkness of a moonless night. The usual sequence played out: the connection, the stillness, and then her graceful, disturbing ascent towards the glass. I kept my eyes on her, a nervous, silent voyeur in my own bedroom. This time, however, something was different. She leaned in close to the mirror, closer than before, until her breath must have fogged the glass. And then, her eyes closed. Her lips began to move. I held my breath, straining my ears in the suffocating silence. It wasn't the murmur of a prayer. It was something else, a sound I couldn't quite place, a soft, urgent noise that felt like it was being pulled from deep within her chest. She was whispering under her breath. The words were indistinguishable, but the tone was clear. It was a plea or a warning, a desperate, low-pitched sound that sent a spike of pure, cold panic through me. What was she pleading for? Who was she warning? She came back to bed that night with a different air. She was stiffer, colder, and her usual sweet scent seemed overlaid with something metallic and strange. When I reached for her, she declined my advances, a thing she had never done. Her body was suddenly rigid next to mine. Then, she turned her back to me, facing the silent, watchful mirror, in a very quiet voice, a voice that was perfectly calm, yet held the crushing weight of a command. She said the one thing that shattered my remaining peace. "If you love me, don't ever try to look at my reflection in the mirror when I am asleep." The words felt like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs, and my skin prickled with goosebumps. Don't ever try to look. It wasn't a request. It was an order delivered with the terrifying authority of a queen addressing a subject. The mirror, I suddenly understood, was more than a piece of furniture. It was her domain, her secret place. What would happen if I did? The question burned in my mind, hot and relentless. The peaceful life I had sought had dissolved, replaced by a cold terror. My marriage to Precious, the beautiful, serene woman referred by my pastor, now felt like a contract signed in blood, with a mirror as the silent, unsettling witness. I was locked in, and the key was a secret I now desperately, foolishly wanted to uncover. The first time she denied me, it felt like a cold stone dropping into a warm pond. Every ripple after was a new question. Her whisper, that command not to look at her reflection, was a wall built in the middle of our bed, and now my mind was searching for a secret door. I kept replaying her words, the chilling finality of them. If you love me, don't ever try to look at my reflection in the mirror when I am asleep. The beautiful, calm woman I married was becoming a beautiful, living riddle. In our 3 months of being married, I'd seen no family. Absolutely none. How can a person, as perfect as she appears, have no ties, no roots? My own father, a man whose love for me was as solid as the foundation of our house, had asked me, not once, but 2 times, to set up a proper meeting with her family. Each time, a thick knot of panic would tighten in my chest, and I would cunningly change the topic. I told myself I was protecting us from unnecessary stress, but the truth was I didn't have a family to present. The only person who had stood as her relative on our wedding day was a middle-aged woman named Auntie Rose. Auntie Rose had a sharp, knowing gaze, and she had hugged Precious with a strange, possessive intensity before disappearing right after the reception without a word to me. I tried to ask Precious about it, gently, one evening as we were sharing a plate of dodo and stew. "Precious, my jewel," I said, reaching across the table to touch the smooth, cool skin of her wrist. The warmth of the food and the coolness of her skin created a small, unsettling contrast. "My father is getting worried. You know how he is. He wants to know your people." She simply smiled. It was her signature move, a bright, lovely smile that was a shield, not an invitation. "Some things take time, Ekene," she replied, her voice soft as velvet. "Let's just enjoy this phase first." She looked away, her eyes briefly flicking toward the corner of the room where the full-length mirror stood sentinel. I felt a small, prickling chill. She does that a lot. She is calm, too calm, unnervingly calm. I hadn't taken any of this seriously before we were officially married. Now, every evasive smile felt like a deliberate withdrawal. Maybe the secret ritual with the mirror was a psychological lock, but a few nights later, I discovered a physical one. The air in the room was thick with the scent of lavender from the bath she was taking. I was tidying up before bed, a nervous habit of mine, running my hands over the smooth cedar wood of her wardrobe door. My heart was thumping with a dull, insistent beat against my ribs, a little rhythm of guilt and curiosity. I knew I shouldn't, but the mirror's silent challenge and the absence of her past were a relentless itch I had to scratch. I slid open the wardrobe door. Her clothes, always perfectly folded and smelling of sweet powder, were a neat, colorful stack. I reached for a thick silk wrapper that she rarely wore and shoved my hand deep inside the folds. My fingers brushed against something hard and foreign. I pulled it out. It was a small, antique jewelry box. It was made of dark, heavy wood with faded gold trim and a tiny, intricate lock on the front. My fingers traced the cold, smooth lines of the wood. It felt ancient, heavy, and very, very secret. What could be so important that it needs to be hidden like this? My throat tightened, a dry, suffocating feeling. I brought it closer to the soft, golden light of the bedside lamp, trying to peer into the seam where the lid met the base, my breath held tight in my chest. A sudden, sharp silence from the bathroom. The sound of running water had stopped. I froze. My entire body became rigid like a piece of dry wood. The tiny hairs on my arms stood up, and a cold wave of sweat instantly slicked the palms of my hands. My heart gave one violent, panicked lurch against my ribs, and then it started hammering out a frantic, desperate rhythm. I fumbled, trying to shove the box back into the silk folds. The bathroom door creaked open. Precious stood in the doorway, a towel wrapped around her body, steam curling around her like a soft, white ghost. Her hair was damp and slick against her neck. The soft glow of the lamp caught her eyes, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something sharp, something cold, that cut right through her usual calm. She wasn't smiling. "Ekene," she said. Her voice was a flat, emotionless line. "What are you doing?" I swallowed, the sound loud and abrasive in the sudden silence. I felt the heat rise up my neck, a blush of sheer, childish guilt. I was just looking for a pair of socks," I stammered, hating the weakness in my voice, while the jewelry box was still half hidden in my hand. She didn't move. She just walked slowly toward me, the soft pad of her bare feet on the polished tile echoing in the room. She was so close now, I could smell the fresh, clean scent of her soap, but the chill in her eyes canceled out any warmth. She looked at my face, then down at the box, and then back up at my face. It was a judgment. She reached out and gently, slowly, took the box from my trembling hand. Her touch was not angry, but it was firm, and it felt heavy, final. "Trust me, it's nothing," she whispered, her voice returning to its soft, deceptive melody. She placed the box back exactly where I'd found it. Some things are personal. Personal? After 3 months of marriage, are there parts of your life that belong only to you and are locked away? The box, now hidden again, felt like the physical counterpoint to the mirror's psychological secret. The mirror hid what she was doing. The box hid who she was. The next morning, the air was tense and fragile. I avoided her gaze. I couldn't stand the knowledge that I had been caught snooping, but I couldn't shake the terror of what she was hiding. Later that evening, after the tension had hung heavy between us like an electric curtain, she came to me. She was dressed in a simple nightdress, sitting on the edge of the bed. She took my hand in hers, and her touch felt like a delicate, warm apology. "I need to tell you something, Ekene," she said, her voice barely a breath. "About my family." I held my own breath, bracing for the truth. They don't support my choices," she said, her beautiful eyes clouded with a manufactured sadness. "They are very traditional. They have very strong opinions about who I should marry and how I should live my life. They have cut me off, and they've warned me." It sounded like a plausible, if sad, story, a perfect, clean explanation. But the very perfection of it made my heart pound with doubt. Her composure was too flawless, her words too rehearsed. It felt like an evasion, a smooth coat of paint over a crack. Then she leaned in, her eyes wide, and her voice dropped to a terrible, profound whisper. The air around her suddenly felt cold. "If they ever find out I'm married," she said, the words cutting through the air like thin, sharp blades, "I don't know what they'll do to me." The sound of that phrase, the image of a threat so intense that even the calm, soft-spoken Precious was afraid of it, scattered my mind completely. The words were a blast of ice water. The blood drained from my face, leaving my skin clammy and tight. I couldn't breathe properly. What trouble have I gotten myself into? I couldn't sleep a wink that night. Every shadow was a figure. Every creak in the house was a footstep. I lay there, rigid, the chilling line echoing in my ears, wondering if the peace I had craved had just introduced me to a quiet, terrifying war. The beautiful, serene woman beside me felt like a ticking clock, and I had no idea when or why it was going to stop. Sleep was now a brittle, easily broken thing. I'd lie awake, my back to Precious, who would be lying perfectly still beside me. I would count my heartbeats, a dull, rhythmic thud in the suffocating silence, and hear the small, breathy sounds of her sleeping. Calm, soft-spoken, avoids conflict. That was the woman I'd married. But the woman who checked her reflection with a fierce, almost desperate intensity every single time we were intimate, staring as if verifying her own existence or searching for a flaw, that was a stranger who haunted my dreams. The woman who had a locked box deep inside her wardrobe. One night, the early morning hours, around 3 a.m., came with the kind of oppressive silence that presses on your eardrums. I was restless, my bladder full from the water I'd nursed all night in a vain attempt to calm my racing mind. I slid out of bed, the movement slow and deliberate like a thief in my own house. The cold of the polished tiled floor hit the soles of my feet, a sharp, physical jolt that cleared the fog from my head. I moved across the room to the restroom, my eyes deliberately not going to the corner where the enemy stood, the full-length mirror. I handled my business in a silent rush, the sound of the running water in the sink a momentary cover for my pounding heart. When I stepped back out, I paused by the bedroom door. The moonlight, pale and spectral, was filtering in through the large window, turning the room a shade of muted, silvery blue. I saw Precious in the bed, a dark, motionless silhouette, her back turned towards the door. She looked utterly peaceful. Then I heard it. It was a low, steady murmur, a voice speaking from the depths of her sleep. It wasn't the soft, gentle voice I knew. This voice was deep, clear, and laced with a desperate kind of urgency. It was a language I hadn't heard her speak with such fluency before. Igbo. Precious had always claimed to struggle with the language, laughing it off with a shy smile. I'm a city girl, Ekene. My Igbo is rusted, she'd say. But now, it was flowing from her lips with the natural, resonant rhythm of a mother tongue. I froze at the door, my body suddenly rigid, every nerve ending tingling with fear and a terrifying sense of triumph. I crept closer, inch by painful inch, until I was just outside the bed area, holding my breath so tightly my chest began to ache. The words were disjointed, punctuated by the soft, rhythmic inhale of a person deep in sleep. But then a phrase cut through the air, clear, cold, and razor-sharp. Ekene must not look at it. He must not see it, or they will find us faster. It is the reflection. The realization slammed into me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The mirror, the object of her relentless, ritualistic inspection, was a beacon, a dangerous window. In my looking into it while she slept, the very thing she'd forbidden was the catalyst that would bring them, her unknown family, or whatever terrible force she was hiding from, crashing into our lives. Why mine splintered. I had to know. The fear was monumental, a massive, crushing weight, but the need to understand was a tiny, sharp scalpel that cut through the fear. My feet moved before my brain could stop them. I was drawn to the corner, pulled by an invisible, magnetic force towards the mirror. I took a step. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Thump! I stood angled to the mirror, not directly in front of it. In the faint, otherworldly moonlight, I could see a shimmering, slightly blurred image in the glass. It was Precious. Her reflection was there, a vague shape, a ghostly outline of her form. The blur was a result of my not being directly in front of it. I could see her peaceful, sleeping body in the bed, her back still turned towards me. The image was too indistinct. I needed one more step, just one more, to put myself at the right angle, to see clearly what she was afraid of me seeing. Was a mark? Was a different face? Was she confirming her appearance, or verifying who was looking back? Was the reflection communicating with someone about what had just happened? I took a slow, agonizing step closer, leaning my body forward, my hands shaking so hard I had to clench them into fists. The reflection of her form in the glass was beginning to sharpen. I am close. Just a little more. I will see the truth now, and this nightmare will end. And then, a sound that sliced through the thick silence, a voice that was no longer a sleep mutter, but a terrifying, wide-awake pronouncement. If you see my face now, something will turn in your life. The voice was clear, cold, and utterly devoid of the soft-spoken Precious I knew. It cut the air like a siren's wail. I jumped back, a gasp escaping my lips, my entire body seizing up. I looked from the mirror to the bed. Precious had not moved. Her body was still perfectly still, her back still to me. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that her eyes were open. I backed away, silently, my feet clumsy, stumbling over the corner of the rug. I didn't dare say a word. I simply crawled back into the bed, lying rigid, facing the opposite wall. The sheets, which moments ago had felt warm, now felt like a shroud of ice. I could feel the presence of the mirror behind me, and the deep, terrifying knowledge that I had stepped right up to the edge of the abyss and been pushed back by a woman who could be perfectly asleep and terrifyingly awake at the same time. I did not sleep again that night. I could feel her presence behind me, motionless, silent. It was the worst kind of silence, the one that spoke volumes. The dawn came, not as a relief, but as a chilling reminder that the world I thought I knew had cracked open, and that she knew exactly what I had tried to do. The next morning was bathed in the deceptively soft light of a new day, but the air was still vibrating with the cold tension from the night. I went through the motions of showering and dressing, my movements wooden, every nerve waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Precious emerged from the bathroom, dressed in a simple, pastel yellow dress that seemed to radiate her usual, unnerving serenity. She walked over to me, and I braced myself for a fight, a tearful apology, or a demand for an explanation. Instead, she stopped right in front of me, her beautiful face unsmiling, her large, dark eyes focused on mine with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. Her first words of the day were not "good morning." She simply pointed a delicate, trembling finger toward the mirror in the corner of the room. Her voice was low, barely a whisper, but it sounded louder than a shout. "Did you look at it while I was asleep?" The question was a hammer blow to my chest. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple request for confirmation of my disobedience. I stood there utterly exposed. If I lie, she'll know. If I tell the truth, what will she do? My mouth felt dry, useless. "Precious, I got up to use the restroom. I saw your reflection. It was blurred, I swear. I didn't mean to disobey you." I hated the pathetic, pleading sound of my own voice. She simply held my gaze for a long, dreadful moment. Then, she let out a sigh that sounded less like a human release of breath and more like the slow deflation of a pressurized tire. "Ekene," she said, her voice softening, but not in a comforting way. "You don't understand the dangers you invite by crossing that line. Please, just trust me." Trust her? Trust the woman who whispers strange pleas in a language she claims not to speak. The irony tasted like ash in my mouth. We were going to church that morning. It was Sunday, and for a fleeting moment, the routine felt normal, a lifeline to the safe, mundane life I craved. Precious and I walked out the front door and down the paved driveway toward my car. As I was opening the driver's side door, I saw her, standing just outside our ornate black gate. Staring intently at the house was a woman. She was rickety, so old the skin on her face was a map of deep, crisscrossing wrinkles, and she wore a plain, faded wrapper. She looked utterly out of place, a strange, almost spectral figure against the backdrop of our modern, wealthy compound. The woman slowly turned her head and focused her gaze on us. Her eyes, ancient and unervingly sharp, seemed to bore right through me. Precious saw her, and the transformation was instant and terrifying. The serene, unshakable calm shattered like glass. Her body went utterly rigid. Her head snapped to the side, her eyes wide with a frantic, desperate panic I'd never seen. The hand she had placed on my arm gripped me like a claw. "If she asks you anything, just say you don't know me," she hissed, her voice a low, desperate whisper that felt like a brand on my ear. Her eyes darted from the old woman to my face, then back again. "In fact, start the car and speed up." I didn't argue. The terror in her eyes was more commanding than any shout. I slid into the driver's seat, fumbling with the key until the engine roared to life. Precious threw herself into the passenger's seat, not buckling up, but crouching low, her body tense and shaking. I revved the engine and pulled out of the gate, speeding past the old woman. As we shot past her, I looked quickly into my side mirror. The old woman hadn't moved. She was just standing there, unblinking, staring at the gate we had just burst through. I sped up the road, the fear clinging to my skin like a second layer of clothing. Who was she? And why did her presence terrify my wife so much that her peace-loving nature instantly dissolved in a sheer terror? We drove in silence for a few minutes, the car filled with the electric charge of unreleased panic. Precious finally sat up, taking deep, shuddering breaths. Then my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a text message from an unknown number. I glanced at it, my stomach lurching. The words were short, simple, and utterly chilling. "She's not who you think she is. And if you love your life, stop asking questions." The message confirmed every single dark suspicion I had. I looked over at Precious, her face pale, her hands still trembling in her lap. My whole body felt heavy with the dreadful weight of a life that was collapsing around me. I had married a secret, and now the secret was beginning to fight back. The final, decisive crack came later that evening. I was in bed, pretending to read a book while I watched Precious. She was unusually quiet, her eyes distant, staring at the ceiling. She got up to use the bathroom, and the moment the door clicked shut, I acted. I knew my limits, but I had reached a point of no return. I had to know who this woman was. I grabbed her phone from the bedside table. It was password protected, but I knew her birthday, April 10th. It worked. I moved to her photo gallery, my hands slick with sweat, my eyes darting to the bathroom door. I scrolled quickly past photos of us, of the wedding, looking for anything that seemed out of place. And then I saw it. It was a picture of Precious, smiling brightly, standing with an older man and a woman who looked so much like her. She had to be her mother. The man was a stranger, but it was the woman who made my heart stop. The older woman was wearing a large, white robe. She stood by the edge of a slow-moving river, and the way she was posed, the solemnity on her face, the rich, white fabric of her clothing, it wasn't just a costume. It was an unmistakable uniform. She looked like a river goddess. I froze. The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. Precious was the daughter of a priestess, or perhaps something even more ancient and terrifying. The mirror ritual wasn't vanity. The locked box wasn't just personal things. It was all a ceremony, a desperate, personal attempt to hide her very nature. The bathroom door handle turned. I slammed the phone back onto the table just as Precious walked out. Her eyes immediately went to the phone lying face up on the table. The screen still illuminated the chilling image of the woman in the white robe blazing across the glass. Her face, for the first time in our marriage, dissolved completely. It wasn't the mask of serenity or the brief panic I saw earlier. It was a raw, devastating exposure of betrayal and finality. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Ekene," she said, and my name in her voice sounded like a final, fateful tolling of a bell. My life has turned. I have seen her face in the photo, and I have just broken the unspoken covenant of silence. I was married to a mystery, and the mystery was about to claim me. I didn't need any more warnings or cryptic commands. I saw the photo, and my skin crawled with the absolute knowledge of the trouble I had gotten myself into. My serene, peace-loving wife, who avoids conflict and was brought to me by a church pastor, was the daughter of a powerful, perhaps ancient, priestess, a river goddess's intermediary. The mirror's gaze was not a vanity check. It was a communication. The reflection she stared at wasn't just her face. It was a connection to the world she had fled. The world where they will find us faster if the reflection is seen while she sleeps. But I knew. The game was over. The peace I craved was gone, replaced by a terrifying war I never signed up for. What now? Where do I run when the enemy is the person I share a bed with? There's a lot to tell you guys. I will make another video and continue my story in part 2. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified once the video drops. Thanks for watching.